sports. All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is 12 p.m. on October 4th, and I am once again announcing Oklahoma still sucks.
And this is All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson, along with Jake Jimerson. We release these episodes 5 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. We will release these at 12 noon each and every single day. And then following the Texas Longhorn game, we will have our immediate reactions whenever that game ends. So we let the football dictate when we talk sports right here on All In Horns. Jake, tomorrow's episode, Texas obviously does not have a game. We have a very special guest, Ryan Aber. We're going to go behind enemy lines. We're actually talking to an Oklahoma Sooner himself. He covers the Oklahoma Sooners. He works for the Oklahoman. He's been there for 18 years. He's covered the team for 11 of those years, and so he has all the inside scoop of all things Oklahoma. And so we're going to go behind enemy lines, and we're going to have a very good conversation with Ryan. And I think we're going to have a really good talk. We won't give him too much grief. Now, we're not just going to let him off the hook either, but we are going to talk to him about Texas and some of the best Texas moments in the Red River rivalry. And Jacob, speaking of the best moments, let's go ahead and discuss some of those big-time moments, some of our fondest memories, if you will, of the Red River rivalry. Jake, I know you've got a big one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first ones I always think of, and I know a lot of people is to say 2005 because it's part of national championship. It's the duel of Colt McCoy and Sam Bradford. I think, was it Quan Cosby or was it Shipley in the end zone where he hit it, went off his chest, goes up, and then he catches it?
So that was Quan Cosby, and then Jordan Shipley had the kickoff return for a touchdown whenever Texas was down 14-0. It was a slow start for Texas, but it was the Jordan Shipley return for a touchdown that kind of turned the tides a little bit.
Yeah, and that's just one of because that was number 5 Texas against number 1 OU, and I think that's something that I would like to see more is Texas and OU to be a top 10, top 5 type matchup. Texas hasn't pulled their weight in that for a while. OU now is not pulling that weight if you want to put it to that top 10 standard. I want to see both programs get synced up to where it's a really big game. No one really has an idea who's winning. You don't have a crazy line like you have this year because the game's already crazy when it is supposed to be lopsided. But I think a lot of people forget the game's even somehow crazier when they are both top teams. It seems to always live up to that hype. And so I'm hoping to get to that level again because 2008 is just to me a game that epitomizes the Red River rivalry because that game was so back and forth, the momentum shifts, not knowing who was going to win, the stress, and feeling like it was a conference championship game because back then it essentially was.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite games because I just remember so much about going into that year. It was Bradford, McCoy, and Tebow. Those were the Heisman finalists. When was the last time we went into a season with 3 guys that all deserving of Heisman, praise and accolades, and going into that year and then it kind of coming down? Was that the 3-way tie year? Am I mistaken with it was OU and Florida in the national championship that year? And Texas, it was the Texas Tech game, or was that the year before?
It was that might have been the year after. No, I think that was that year because then they won 16-13 the next year in a really close one. It was that year, I'm pretty sure, where they ended up losing to Tech. OU beat Tech, and then OU got in for some unknown. I mean, because of the BCS ranking, but I think anyone with half a brain thought Texas should have been in.
Yeah, but it came down to Colt McCoy, Sam Bradford, and Tim Tebow all year long, all season long. Those were the Heisman finalists. It was such a great year. And then Bradford ended up winning it that year. But yeah, that was a really fun game. One memory that I have, obviously, that sticks out, and I talked about it in yesterday's episode, as I think about it on a weekly basis, is 49-0. Recent memory, recency bias, if you will, but still, I don't know if I'll ever forget that game because I just remember And I know OU was down a quarterback and they had to switch him out, and they were playing this rinky dink, floozy offense of it was trying to be, like a wildcat type offense. I don't even know who the quarterback was that year after the backup came in and stuff, but it was Venables' first year. Sark just completely dominated. And 49-0 will stay in my brain forever. And I don't even know if there's an exact moment or an exact play that jumps out. I just remember thinking, go for two, make it 50. That's all I was thinking in my head.
And I think part of that is A, because it was a shutout and you just don't see that often in this series. But B, Texas had been on a horrible stretch against Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They had that one game, which I'm going to talk about here in a second because it was a great game, but they had lost 6 of the last 7 to OU before that 49-0. So there was a lot of just frustration let out. They had lost 3 in a row. They had lost the 4 overtime game the year before where they blew the huge lead to Caleb Williams coming in. And there was just a lot of frustration let out that year. Kind of like there was in a way when Texas won with Sam Ehlinger 48-45 and what, Dicker the kicker, where his legend was born. And that game is just always one. I still use the Dicker the kicker
always
GIF on Twitter or X, where he's just on the sideline right before he does the kick, and it looks like he's risen up the water girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
what's up?
Yeah,
what's up?
And then just
he's a freshman, dude. As a true freshman, that took some balls, man. That dude had some cojones on him to make that kick and to live up to that. But I think that game, obviously, that one, I always just think of Gus Johnson's call. And at Texas, Red River Rivalry, Oklahoma win. He just saying and spewing out words, had no coherence about him. But so first of all, I'm a huge Gus Johnson fan. Anytime there's a Gus Johnson game on TV, I'm watching it just because I just like the energy he provides. He's perfect for college football. But college football is better with Gus Johnson, and the Red River Rivalry is better with Gus Johnson calling the game as well. But those are some good moments for me. There are some also, Jake, there are some players. Which game did you go to? Which one was which one did you go to in person? What year was that?
It wasn't a fun one, I can tell you that much.
Well, there wasn't a lot of fun ones within that time period.
I believe it was 24. Was it 24? Yeah, I believe it was 2014. The 31-26 loss. It was Tyron Swoops playing it was Tyron Swoops playing at quarterback. Texas was supposed to get kind of dominated. That Texas team wasn't good. They ended up making it a really close game, but obviously, as they did a lot in the Charlie Strong era, they just came up short. It is kind of wild going back and looking at some of these box scores, especially from the Charlie Strong era, where there were some of those games where Texas just ran the ball 60 times to 12 passes. And
that's insane.
That is just, unless you are running an option attack, that is just not a great football scheme. I very much enjoy, and I do not take Sarkisian's scheme for granted. I think some fans do and forget just how good his scheme is when they start nitpicking tiny little play calls here and there and forget that it has sucked for over a decade. And now Texas has what is unanimously considered one of the best offensive minds in all of football.
Well, Jake, it is October and it is spooky season. You can see in the background, we've all Halloweened up, and Gerald's still back there kicking it. Doesn't contribute much to the show, but he's still there. Who were some of the scariest players that you remember going up against for the Texas Longhorns in the Red River Rivalry? For me, Jake, one guy that it wasn't so much that I was scared of him. I just can't stand him. And I'm still not a huge fan of him, and it's probably for this reason. But Kyler Murray just stood out to me as just an annoying nuance of a player, just a nuisance, just scrambling around. Feels like a toddler that stole your phone and is running around the living room, and you just can't catch him. And for whatever reason, is a successful college football player. And did very good things at Oklahoma. But yeah, Kyler Murray was one of those guys for me, as well as Drake Stoops. I don't know what it was about Drake Stoops. Maybe it was that Jordan Shipley effect. And I was like, no, you're supposed to be playing for us. And then the last name Stoops. The last name Stoops and Oklahoma obviously go hand in hand. And so, he had his dad there, and he was annoying, and he dominated Texas for a long period of time, and he was always a great head coach. And then his son plays there, and then he starts scoring touchdowns for him against Texas. It just built up a lot of old frustration and old PTSD.
Yeah, I think the first, and this is recency bias, but I don't care. Stuntsman, I am.
Yeah.
It feels like he has been there for 30 years. He's really good player. He seems to somehow play his best game against Texas, and that's with him being an All-American type linebacker that has a lot of really good games. And he hates Texas. I mean, he shows up for that game. He makes t-shirts when they win that game, and say what you want about that, but this rivalry is that level where it is just different. It is a rent-free situation. I do not think rent, and some Texas fans won't like this, but I don't think rent-free applies in this. If you're not constantly hating Oklahoma in your mind while still having a respect, because I do think there is a respect in this rivalry that goes both ways. But if there's not a deep, just rooted hatred for that other team, then something's wrong with you. And that goes with the players as well. A lot of Texas players better have been looking forward to this game since the clock hit zeros at the end of last season. They better have been thinking about, oh, you ruined our perfect season last year. We played one of our worst football games, and we need to right that wrong. And Saturday will be their chance.
Yeah, well, Jake, I think there's an opportunity here for the Longhorns to do just that. But another player that I think we have adoration for, we actually kind of like now that he's not an Oklahoma Sooner, and he wasn't just born and bred an Oklahoma Sooner, but Baker Mayfield. He put on some great performances in the Red River rivalry. He always, showed up and he led Oklahoma to a playoff berth and had, it was never his fault as to why Oklahoma didn't see a national championship. He played great in that playoff game, but he and CeeDee Lamb, what was it? CeeDee Lamb had 3 touchdown receptions in that game. And I always go back to when Dallas drafted CeeDee Lamb, and I just go back to that one play where there was maybe like 7 Longhorn defenders in the same picture as just one number 2, and he ends up scoring a touchdown out of it. There's some really bad memories, some very scary memories, some nightmares, if you will, that have haunted my dreams. And I'm really hoping that the Sark era can really put an end to that, because I'm really wanting Sark to be kind of the Lincoln Riley, if you will, to make a horrible comparison in this rivalry of just pure domination and just a very long win streaks coming through, winning 6 out of the next 7 years, and hopefully Oklahoma is a ranked team. Hopefully I'm hoping Oklahoma is a top 10 team in the country, and Texas still has that type of success against them.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the ultimate goal, is just being the team that Oklahoma can't get over. Because even in Mac Brown's tenure, that was the case early on, was he could never get past Oklahoma.
Right.
And obviously when that did happen, he reached the mountaintop pretty quickly. But I think a lot of people forget how much he struggled with them. But I got one more name for you. And this is mainly because he haunted me both in high school and in college. D.D. Westbrook.
D.D. Westbrook's a good one.
I played against him in high school. He absolutely made my defense look silly.
I was at that game.
You were at that game. I played offensive line. I had no part. I thankfully did not have to deal with that. I will say I did have to go against the state MVP, who was a defensive tackle. Actually, it was not D.D. Westbrook.
Yeah, that's how good that Cameron Yo team was.
Yeah, and against Texas, he had that game. He had 10 catches, 232 yards. And 3 touchdowns, with a long that was a 71-yard touchdown. He was a nightmare, and really the biggest reason that OU won that game 45-40, because Mayfield actually had one of his worst games, even though he was 22-31 with 390 yards and 3 touchdowns. Most of that was to Westbrook, obviously, and he had two interceptions in that game as well. So the TD Westbrook kind of single-handedly won them that game. And I always think of that because first I had the flashes, the PTSD of seeing him while I'm on the sideline. And, we're trying to score as an offense to stay in it against the number one team. And TD Westbrook just makes 11 players miss and just scores a touchdown every time.
You know what it kind of reminded me of was whenever you see those fake Madden clips now, or NCAA, or college football clips on the game of these viral videos of where the guy goes, he jukes out the entire team and then he runs back and he jukes them all out the second time. That's essentially what D.D. Westbrook did to your high school team. So I mean, sorry not to rub it in or anything, but that I saw it firsthand, and that's exactly what it was. I was like, who's this 5'2", 100-pound guy who just can't be brought down?
There's no way this guy will be good in college. And then he was in the Heisman race.
Yeah. All right, Jake. Well, let's go ahead and switch gears. That is half of our show. We're going to spend the second half looking around the NCAA. There's some people would consider this an apple orchard picking day. Go out with your girlfriend, go run some errands, give your girlfriend the day because college football just doesn't have the highlights of a typical, must-watch Saturday, if you will. Not like October 12th, you're going to want to sit down and do absolutely nothing. Mark that day off. No weddings, no apple picking, no looking at jewelry, no grocery shopping, no chores around the house. Do all your chores on Friday or Thursday. Take the day off if you need to, because October 12th is a big one. A lot of people would say, maybe not us, but a lot of people would say this week is not the best week of college football, but we are still going to take a look around. And Jake, you actually think that there are some pretty good matchups this Saturday.
Yeah, sometimes people get too attached, and this is where my rant comes into play. Because of the 12-team playoff, I think there's a lot of important games this week, and I'm excited to talk about the ones we're going to talk about. And obviously, you mentioned it, that October 12th weekend and the October 19th weekend. Those are going to be special, but I think people are sleeping on this. I don't think this is bad as a week, as an apple picking week, as you called it, as some previous years. I think there's still quite a few games to look forward to, and maybe some that you don't know about yet that we're going to talk about.
Well, let's go ahead and go into this one, Jake. You mentioned this one, Syracuse at number 25, UNLV. This is a Friday night game, and UNLV favored by just under a touchdown.
Yeah, Syracuse has been a pretty solid team so far this year. They're 3-1. A lot of people may not know, but they Kyle McCord is their quarterback. You may know him from being the quarterback at Ohio State last year. He's playing really solid for them. Obviously, UNLV is square in that race for that 12th seed in the playoff. Them and Boise State are kind of the top two running for it right now. And so this game matters a lot. It wouldn't have mattered a year ago, but it matters this year. And that's one I'm actually looking forward to watching. It's at UNLV. They play at the Raiders Stadium. And I haven't really gotten to watch a UNLV game yet. So this is going to be kind of my first look at them. So it's kind of hard to have a pick. I think 6.5 points for a G5 team against a power conference team, and Syracuse, who kind of always feels like they're slept on, but consistently wins 7 to 8 games. I think that's too many. So I'm going to take Syracuse to cover, but I think UNLV will win this and stay in that hunt for the playoffs. And this will be one of those resume builders they need to try to get in over a Boise State.
Syracuse has had actually a pretty decent season, and McCord has actually done very well. I think, in fact, if I am not mistaken, he has not thrown an interception this year, unless that changed last week. But yeah, Syracuse is a fairly good team this year, and I actually am going to take Syracuse to win outright, possibly destroying the chances of UNLV's playoff hopes, which, these G5 teams, if they're going to want to make a 12-team playoff, they essentially have to go undefeated and win their conference.
Yeah, the counter to that would be that might already not be true. Boise State has one loss. They're the highest ranked G5 team, but that one loss is a last second field goal loss to top 10 Oregon. So that kind of throws a wrench in things. Sure. I don't know where you got the McCord interception thing. He does have 5 on the year.
Maybe I was looking at another. I was maybe looking at another football, another team. another
Yeah,
team. to support.
but Syracuse has been doing pretty good this year. That's kind of an interesting just matchup. I feel like it is just kind of odd at this point in the season. Is Syracuse going to a UNLV? Just makes for an interesting matchup.
It does, because typically you would see that game and it would be played at Syracuse for sure.
Yeah, and it'd be like week 1 or week 2.
Right. So, Jake, let's go ahead and move it to our next game. Number 9, Missouri at Kyle Field in College Station against the Texas A&M Aggies. Aggies 2.5-point favorites.
I'm not sure where to go with this one because I don't know whether I believe in Missouri. I don't know if I can jinx A&M because I picked them to win last week, trying to jinx them, and they actually did win. Though I guess picking them to beat Arkansas isn't really that far fetched because it is Arkansas against A&M. But I think this is the game where if Missouri wins this game, I'll be okay. Missouri's legit, and with their schedule, they're going to have a chance to be in an SEC title game because looking at their schedule, they do have at Alabama, but other than that, the only ranked SEC team they have left would be Oklahoma, and that's in Columbus, and that's kind of become a little rivalry. OU fans might not like saying that, but they sure do fight a lot on X, and so. I'm going to take Missouri to win. I'm going to take them to win outright. I think they're going to feel a little disrespected being underdogs. I think they're going to use that, though I don't like Brady Cook coming out and trying to say that their speakers in their practice facility are louder than what they're going to deal with at Kyle Field. I feel like when players say that, they always end up looking stupid. Brady Cook hasn't really been playing at a high level yet this year. But I think this is the game where it comes together. I think Missouri's probably been hiding some stuff because they haven't really, I know Boston College was ranked when they played them, but Boston College isn't a top 25 team in the country. I think this is the game where Missouri says, yes, we're still a top 10 team. Last year wasn't a fluke. This year we may have looked shaky, but we've been saving stuff and we're going all out this game. But I think it will be close. I think they end up pulling away and winning. I'm going to go with 34-24.
All right. Yeah, I actually might take a page out of your book, Jake, and make the regrettable mistake of betting on Texas A&M to win a big game. The more I'm looking at it, I am just, for whatever reason, I'm kind of leaning towards Texas A&M in this matchup for whatever reason. I think it's a lot of that front seven against Missouri's offensive line. I like Texas A&M's front seven. I think their defensive line is going to be able to get pressure on Brady Cook. I don't think Missouri is going to really be able to get anything on the run game going. And this is kind of where they've made their bread and butter. When they've been most successful this season is when Missouri is running the football. I think Texas A&M can shut that down. And Brady Cook has 4 touchdown passes this year, Jake. They're all to Luther Burden. And Luther Burden only has 19 receptions on the entire season, 4 of those for touchdowns. Now, Luther Burden, in my opinion, might be the best wide receiver in the country. If it's not Travis Hunter, it's Luther Burden. And I've been a big fan of his. I think the dude is an absolute stud. They need to get him more involved in the offense. So if they are able to get him more involved in the offense, I think it could be a good day for Missouri. I think Kyle Field needs to show up because we've always said if you're going to be one of the best home field advantages, you actually have to take advantage of that home field and win those games. Texas A&M tends to lose at home for whatever reason in these big games. You would think that would be an elevation for them, but that doesn't always show on the scoreboard. So I am going to take Texas A&M in this one to beat Missouri.
And kind of you're talking about it should be an elevation. This is now their second opportunity to have a top 10 win at home in a game where it's not far-fetched at all for them to win. I thought they should have, I can't remember if they were favored in that Notre Dame game, but I know the line was really close and most people were picking A&M to win that game. And they lost. And it was not a very great football game. The defenses looked good, but it still was an ugly game. And now you have Missouri, who has had 2 close games in a row, maybe isn't looking quite as good as last year. If you lose this one and you lost the Notre Dame game, and, as much as A&M fans talk about Texas's schedule, A&M has a very weak schedule. They do not play Alabama or Georgia. If they win this game, the only ranked teams they have left are LSU and Texas.
Yeah.
And they have not lost an SEC game yet. So
And LSU is not. They're kind of middle of the road in my opinion. I think they're going to finish middle of the SEC. I don't think they finish in the top half of it.
Yeah, they have Mississippi State, South Carolina, New Mexico State, and Auburn left.
Oh,
That
man,
is
that's
other than LSU and Texas, and they get Texas at home.
Yeah.
So if they win this game, they're probably going to start thinking they're going to go to the SEC title game. If they don't, to me, it kind of has to feel like a failure for the start of the season. You beat the teams that you really should have beat, and two of them were probably closer than they should have been. And then you lose two just golden opportunities to win top 10 games at home. I don't think fans there would be that happy with the start of the Elko era if that is what happens. And I do think that's what's going to happen.
All right, Jake, SMU at number 22, Louisville. Louisville dropped an egg against Notre Dame. Now, that was not a conference game, so, doesn't really count in the big picture of things in terms of their chances to make a playoff run and win the ACC. But SMU at Louisville, and Jake, tell you what, I think that SMU team is pretty solid. I know they just took care of business against Florida State. That's not that big of a deal, but they took care of business.
Yes, they did lose the one other decent opponent they played this year in BYU. BYU's maybe looking better than we would have expected, so I will note that. I think SMU is going to get a little humbled this week. Sometimes when I pick a team to win, like I did in Louisville last week, and then they lose, I kind of spite them, and then they make me look silly again. This time I'm sticking with my guns. I don't think Louisville played a very good game last week. I think they're going to show up ready to play. And I think SMU is going to get that humbling moment of joining a power conference this week. And I think Louisville wins by 2 or 3 scores in this game.
It is a 7-point spread, and I think SMU is going to cover that spread. I think Louisville wins the game, but I do think it's going to be pretty close. I think SMU is going to give them a game. I don't know if Louisville is the type of team that's just going to just blow teams out. I think for whatever reason, I don't know if their defense is good enough to just consistently just take a team down. I mean, SMU, they have scored games. They scored 42 against FSU, 42-16. They beat TCU 66-42. Again, they allowed a lot of points, so I don't know if their defense is necessarily all that solid either. BYU beat them 18-15. That's really the only game they've been held to a low amount of points. And against, Houston Christian, okay, yeah, 59-7. But they have been scoring points and scoring in bunches. And I'm not sure how good Louisville is. I think this is going to be a very high scoring game. I think it's going to be a barn burner, but I do think Louisville gets a close one. Ole Miss trying to redeem their loss against Kentucky at home. This is make or break because now you're going into Ole Miss's thick of their schedule. If they lose this one, Jake, they're looking at a very, very tough road ahead of them and games where they maybe thought they would probably be undefeated at this point. You go 2 losses back to back before you get to the meat of your schedule. Things may not be looking great in Mississippi for Lane Kiffin there. If that is the case, what do you think happens at South Carolina where, hey, it's Cocktober, Jake?
I'm interested to see this game because I don't think we still know a ton about South Carolina. They looked good against LSU at home, but they blew that game ultimately. They should have won that game. They blew that game. I don't think we know much about Ole Miss yet. Their one loss is the only good team they've played against. And Ole Miss is a team that all preseason I was saying I thought was a national title contender. And then they just lay an absolute egg. The first team with a pulse they play against. And for Ole Miss, I talk about Missouri, this being, make or break time. For Ole Miss, their season is done and dusted if they lose this game. And I actually, real quick, I need to apologize. Or wait, no, I'm looking at South Carolina. Never mind. I don't need to apologize to A&M. I thought for a second Ole Miss had A&M on their schedule. But if you look at Ole Miss's the rest of their schedule, they have at LSU, which playing in Death Valley is tough. They have home against Oklahoma, at Arkansas, home against Georgia, and then Florida, Mississippi State to end it. If they lose this game, I think they're out of the playoff hunt.
Yeah, because you can't
because
say that they're going to beat Georgia. That would probably mark them at least 3 losses right there. And then if you're losing to Kentucky and South Carolina, what makes you think you stand a chance at Death Valley or against Oklahoma?
Exactly. So this is kind of backs against the wall, and because of that, I don't think Ole Miss is going to lay an egg again. I don't know if they're going to cover. I'm going to pick them not to cover. I say that they're going to win by a touchdown, maybe something like 38-31. I think this is a game where Ole Miss's defense maybe doesn't look quite as good because Kentucky is just not a great offense. So that game was low scoring. That game is on the Ole Miss offense. I think they rebound and kind of carry the way to win this game at South Carolina.
This is a 2:30 game. If this was a night game, I would take the Gamecocks easily. I think if this was a night game and they had that type of environment, because that is a very fun crowd. But I'm going to go ahead and take Ole Miss to win this one outright. I don't see them losing 2 in a row. This is supposed to be Ole Miss is like, this is peak Ole Miss, Jake. This is supposed to be like the best team Ole Miss has seen in generations. And to lay an egg like that in Kentucky, that is very disappointing. I would hope Lane Kiffin has this team focused, ready to go again. And I would think that this team's pretty upset. In fact, I'm going to say they win by 2 scores. All right. Pretty quickly, Jake, I do want to get to these next 2 games before we log out for the rest of the day. We are past the 30-minute mark, but who's really keeping track? All right. Number 10, Michigan, not favored at Washington in a air quote national championship rematch. This is not a national championship rematch, folks. Neither one of the same head coaches are coaching this game. You've got neither of the same quarterbacks playing quarterback in this game. The amount of talent that left Washington from the skill positions, they lost all 3 of their starting wide receivers from a year ago, not to mention the Taylon Bryce and other defensive studs. And then Michigan had, what was it, 16 players drafted in the draft last year. So this is a completely revamped Michigan Wolverine team as well. Again, head coaches are completely different. This is not a national championship rematch. However, Washington being favored at home over number 10 Michigan, there's a storyline.
I don't understand this line. I really don't. It's not like Washington has any good wins this season. The 2 teams they've played that are any good, they've lost to in Rutgers and Washington State. Their wins are Weber State, Eastern Michigan, and Northwestern. None of those are world beaters by any means. And I'm not saying Michigan's world beaters, but I think they're being disrespected here. They just beat USC a couple weeks ago. They went on the road and beat Minnesota. I think they go in and they win this game by a couple possessions. I will be betting this game. I will be betting the Michigan money line. This one just confuses me, and I think it's just kind of a disrespect of Michigan just because they don't win pretty, but they have been winning. Their only losses to Texas, and that continues after this week.
I will say Rogers for the Washington Huskies. Will Rogers has over 1,000 yards passing. He has 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And so they're throwing the ball around, and that offense is humming. And if there's any offense that is going to match Michigan and put some points on the board and outplay Michigan's defense, then Michigan's going to have a tough time running with Washington. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington wins this game, Jake. Now, if Washington can move the ball and can have as prolific of an offense as Will Rogers is capable of playing, then yeah, I think that's a recipe for success. Now, if it can't happen, it could be an ugly game, and it could be a heavy favored Michigan team. But yeah, I'm actually going to go with Michigan winning this game outright, but I think it's going to be very close. I think it's by a final second field goal. I think they win by 1.
I will just counter you real quick. I know we need to get to one more game, but Washington in those 2 losses scored 19 and 18 points.
Yeah.
I think Michigan has a better defense than Washington State and Rutgers. Rutgers ran the ball all over Washington. I just don't think it's a good matchup for Washington. So yeah, I'm going to say Michigan wins this game by 10-17.
Nice. All right. And the final game that we are going to cover, it is College Game Day. It is Woke versus Coke, baby. Miami taking on Cal in California. Miami is 10-point favorites. And I don't know if they're watching the same Miami team that we've watched over the last couple of weeks. Miami has not necessarily looked great. I know that Virginia Tech Miami game is a rivalry game, and that game typically is kind of a toss-up in terms of who wins anyway. But Jake, tell the story about how Cal students came up with the woke versus Coke situation.
You might actually be better to say the exact story of how they came up with it.
So here's obviously, if anybody who knows, cons versus it was the cons versus Catholics back in the 80s going into the 90s with Miami and Notre Dame. That was a really big rivalry back then. That was kind of the rise of the U. If you watch the 30 for 30, the convicts versus the Catholics, that was kind of the big thing. Well, now Cal students have coined the term woke versus Coke, and they're selling t-shirts. Cal students are actually the ones that came up with this. They are woke. They're the woke ones, obviously, and Miami is they're the Coke. And so they are selling t-shirts, and I'm assuming you're going to see this all over College Game Day. It ought to make for a very interesting scene on ESPN in the morning.
Yeah, all 20 of those Cal fans are going to be out there with their signs. Miami has been looking shaky. I know you don't want to go to Kyle Field 2 times, but I would have picked a different game. The only fun thing about this game is it gives me a reason to stay up really late because it starts at 9:30. But let's not forget Cal gave Florida State their only win in a 14-9 slugfest. I guess they're getting credit for winning at Auburn, and Auburn's not a good team. And also, again, Auburn specializes in somehow losing games they should win, and they turned the ball over 5 times in that game and lost by 1 score.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Cal believer. I still think Miami's a good football team that's just kind of going through some close games, kind of like Texas did last year. Last year was Texas's first year of kind of being back. This is kind of Miami's first year. I think Miami kind of sends a message this week that they're riding the ship. I think Miami wins 41-12.
Yeah, Jake, I think it's going to be a pretty good blowout. I think Miami takes this one handedly. 3-touchdown game for the Miami Hurricanes over Cal. I think they take care of business fairly easily. Well, Jake, that's going to do it for our show. Everybody, please tune in and put your alerts on. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Do all the great things that you love doing for us. And tomorrow's episode, instead of an immediate reaction show following the Texas Longhorn game, they are obviously on a bye week and they do not have a game for us to react to. We are going to have Ryan Aber from the Oklahoman behind enemy lines. We're going to be talking to the Sooner insider himself, and we're going to have a great conversation, and you're not going to want to miss it. So he'll give you the inside scoop on all things Sooners right here on All In Horns, your daily fix for Texas Longhorns right here on Rogue Sports Network on YouTube, and where all podcasts can be heard. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, huck 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.